What we want families to do is to look at more than the chandeliers. We want them to critically evaluate some of the key components in an assisted living setting.
Talking with people about how to have a great retirement. This is the Rock Your Retirement Show. We don't talk about money, but we talk about almost everything else you need to rock your retirement. Now, here's your host, Kathy Klein.
Welcome to Rock Your Retirement. This is the show where we talk about what you need besides money before you retire. And today we have a very special guest for you because she is going to talk about something that is hugely important. And we have put together a freebie for you, and at the end of the show, we'll tell you how to get it. So today's guest is Chris Murphy. And in 2001, Chris placed her mother in a local assisted living community, and the experiences that both she and her mother experienced were the genesis of her interest in and passion for residential care advocacy. Since 2007, she holds an RCFE Administrator Certificate, and her thesis work was documented in, I'm going to say this for you slowly, an exposition of irregularities in residential care facilities for the elderly, which is also known as RCFEs, in San Diego and Imperial counties. I know that's a mouthful. And it was published by Montezuma Publishing in SDSU, go Aztecs, that's my alma mater, in 2010, based on original research conducted on public files of 354 communities located in San Diego. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but let me tell you, what she talks about is so hugely important. It's really worth the listen. If you have a loved one who is considering going into an assisted living facility, you really want to listen to today's episode. So tell me, Chris, you know a lot about assisted living communities. What should people look for besides that beautiful chandelier that they see in the lobby?
What we want families to do is to look at more than the chandeliers. We want them to critically evaluate some of the key components in an assisted living setting. And those 5 items I'd like to describe to you today are the administrator, the administrator's job, what the role of the administrator is, talk a little bit about the food that is offered at assisted living facilities.
That's my favorite part, the food.
Oh, yes, it is. And it can be. And staffing. Staffing is really an important element, of course, of the care that the facility is able to provide. And medication assistance. And then what the personal care aspects are that are provided by that staff that we're going to talk about. So those are the 5 things that we think are better focused on than the chandeliers and the spa that the facility may offer.
Darn, because that's usually the only thing I look at is food and the chandelier.
Right.
So the first is the administrator. So I wouldn't even have thought anything about that. So what do you look for in the administrator?
Well, our view is that the better qualified the administrator, the better facility that the administrator is going to run. Now, keep in mind that in California, we have about 7,500 assisted living facilities in the state, and about 80% of those are the small 6-bed facilities. So an administrator in a small facility and an administrator in a large 200 to 2,000 bed facility, they're going to certainly have different jobs. But what you want to ask, it should be considered that you're interviewing the administrator, basically, because you'd like to know whether the administrator has any prior caregiving experience, whether that administrator has a college degree, perhaps in social work or in nursing or in a related field. You want to ask the administrator how often he or she is in the facility, hands-on, walking the floors. The more watchful the administrator is, our view is the better care that residents are going to get because the caregiver staff is going to know that the administrator is there watching and is evaluating all the time the care that residents are receiving.
That is a good point.
We also think that it's important to see whether that administrator loves the residents or not. If there's an administrator who isn't jovial or who's detached from the residents, maybe that tells you that they're not quite tuned into the residents. We would be wanting that there would be good camaraderie between the residents and the administrator, that he would actually know or she would actually know residents' names and address them by their name when that person is on the floor. We would also be looking for how much rapport the administrator has with the caregiver. Do the caregivers seem to respect the administrator? We think that's really hugely important, and it assures, we believe, a better outcome for the residents if there is a strong level of respect between the caregiving staff and the administrative staff. Again, it's going to change somewhat. It's going to be slightly different if you're in a 6-bed facility rather than in a 200 or a 2,000-bed facility, but the principles remain.
That's really a good point. I have an acquaintance who runs I think it's a 10-bed facility, and if I remember correctly, she either is a retired nurse or did something in the medical field, and her husband is a retired surgeon, but he's not really, he doesn't work for the facility or anything like that, but he's there a lot. So that, in your eyes, would be a plus, right, for a small community?
Absolutely, because in the state of California, assisted living facilities can have hospice residents, they can have approval for bedridden residents, and they can have approval for total care. That means that the caregiving staff has to do everything for that total care resident. So people who are bedridden and who are total care tend to have more significant chronic medical conditions. And if the administrator and the licensee have some already built-in sensitivity to medical issues, we believe that the outcome is better for the resident.
Okay, well, I'm definitely going to keep that in mind when I visit these communities, because I do visit a lot. So I guess the next thing on your list is my favorite thing, food. So tell us what we need to know about food.
Oh, food is so important. Food is so important. It is for all of our lives, and if you're living in an assisted living facility where you have limited access to getting out to restaurants and limited activities, that food becomes really, really important. So you're a family looking for a placement, and your loved one is a diabetic, for instance. So what we want to make sure is that the staff understand that your resident, your loved one, is diabetic, and that they're not serving your resident ice cream at night.
Does that really happen?
Absolutely, it happens.
You mean there could be a caregiver and they serve your diabetic mom or dad or aunt or uncle ice cream?
Yes.
That's crazy.
It totally happens. What we're looking for, well, actually, the state regulations require that basic services in an assisted living facility in California require 3 meals a day, 2 snacks, and adequate hydration. Those are the regs. So that food can't just, we don't want it just to be perfunctory 3 meals. We want them to be 3 delicious, nutritious meals in adequate quantity so that if the resident wants seconds, that they can have seconds. So that's a question to always ask for. One of the best ways to get a fix on how good the food is for the family member who's considering the placement in this particular facility, come and have a meal there. Come and have a meal with the person that you're going to be placing there. Check it out at dinner. Check it out at breakfast. See what the quantity of food is. See what the quality of the food is. and see whether it tastes good. Part of what happens to elders as they continue their aging process, you start losing your taste buds. And it's got to be really fantastically tasty for the resident to feel satisfaction with their food. So I would really recommend coming in and tasting the food, having a couple of meals there. One meal is not going to do it. You need to sample on a couple of meals, and maybe on a weekend and maybe on a weekday midday. That would be really perfect. Another issue related to food is if your family member is placed in this facility and they have the flu, is the facility equipped with enough caregivers to be able to take the food to your residents' room and to tray feed them in their room? Some facilities run a little lean on staffing, and they don't necessarily have enough staff to take people out of the dining room and then to tray pass that food. So that would be really important, because we still want our family member to receive nutrition even if they have the flu and can't get down to the dining room or to the dining room table.
Well, wouldn't that also mean if they didn't have staff that could take the tray to the resident, that the resident might want to go into the dining room, and then wouldn't everybody else get sick?
Yes, absolutely. It does. It's tray passing food when someone is ill seems to be an issue that we have seen through the public records. So that's the only reason that I bring it up.
So that means that, wait, can we go back to that? Because I find this very interesting, because I got sick on a cruise ship once, and it was not fun at all. And I tend to think of these communities as just little cruise ships, which is why I would love to, I'm saying to my husband, let's move into one, not assisted living, obviously, but it is something on my mind that this seems like a really great way to spend my retirement, is living in a community. So you're telling me that some of these communities don't have enough staff to bring you a meal if you're sick. To me, that seems like that's a great way to infect your entire population. Because I don't know about you, Chris, but I wouldn't want to miss a meal, even if I'm sick.
You're supposing that a sick individual can still get to the dining room.
Oh, that's true. If they're bedridden, then they can't really do that. So the communities just don't bring them any food, and they just let them sit there and be hungry?
Well, staffing is always an issue, and it's just something that I bring up as a topic for discussion for the family who's considering a placement, that they need to assure themselves through conversation with the administrator that there is sufficient staff to make sure that that person is given a tray in their room if they can't make it to the dining room.
That is an excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up. And I interrupted you. What were you going to say earlier?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I just wanted to mention a few things about chewability of food. If a loved one has dentures or has arthritis so bad that they can't cut up their meat to be able to get it into small enough pieces that they can chew it, we would be looking for the staff to provide the service of cutting up the meat small enough so that the person could eat it. If there are special dietary restrictions like low salt or low sodium diets, the kitchen would have the facility to recognize the dietary preferences and the dietary needs of the resident, including pureeing food if that person wasn't able to take solid food. So food isn't just that beautiful meal that's 5 courses. It's the more practical part of that is catering to the dietary and health needs of the individual who's in the assisted living facility.
Excellent point. Thank you so much. Anything else that we need to know about food?
Only I would make a mention that facilities that I would like to be in would have an afternoon snack tray that would be passed around, because I always get peckish in the afternoon, and I would like to have somebody pass around snack food to me that was appropriate for my disability and my health needs. Hydration is absolutely critical We see in the public record many circumstances where residents are dehydrated and have to leave through the emergency procedures to an ER because they are so dehydrated. So keeping the resident hydrated is really, really important. And that means that you have to sort of keep offering cranberry juice, apple juice, water. The facility should be offering plenty of hydration to residents all day long to assure that nobody is getting dehydrated. Now, this, of course, assumes that this is particularly important if the dependency of the resident is more acute. If the person is an independent living person or still is driving their car and coming in and out of the assisted living facility, then of course that's not going to be an issue. But we're talking about those people who are already medically frail and who may have significant health needs. We want to keep them as hydrated as possible. So it's really the function of the facility to make sure that adequate hydration is offered all the time to the residents, so that they are not going to suffer from dehydration.
That is a good point, and you're making me thirsty, so now I have to take a drink of water.
There you go. See?
So what else should we look at besides the administrator, food and water, or hydration? What else do you look at when you're rating a facility?
Well, we're interested in staffing. In California, there are no staffing ratios in the regulations for assisted living facilities. The default is 1 in a facility. Actually, the only staffing ratios that are in Title 22 are for nighttime care. And in the 99-bed facility at night, you only need 1 awake staff with another person who's on the premises who can get to the floor within 10 minutes. So,
and that's 1 for how many people?
99.
Wow, only 1 person awake for 99 residents? That's crazy.
Those are the regs. So the requirement, the default setting for staffing is that the staff has to be in sufficient quantities they have to be in sufficient quantity and competent to meet the resident needs. But the person who's in charge of making that assessment of sufficiency and competency is the licensee, is the owner of the facility. So it's really important that when a family is reviewing an assisted living facility, that they observe how many staff are on the floor at any point in time. In a small 6-bed facility, we might expect during the daylight hours to see 2 people, 2 caregivers for 6 people. Keep in mind that the staff in a 6-bed facility typically provide caregiving. They do the cooking, they do the cleaning, they do the care provision for the residents, that is, giving showers, taking care of activities, and all of those tasks are spread across 1 or 2 people in a 6-bed facility. So the more acute your resident needs are, you might want to really observe the quantity of staff that the facility has to see, for instance, if you have a wandering dementia resident and it's a 6-bed facility, can 2 staff take care of all of their other chores, including caregiving, toileting, showering, helping people get dressed, and watch your loved one who may be a wanderer? So you always have to assess what your resident needs with what the facility is able to provide. And always, if you have questions about this, then we go back to the head of the line and we talk to the administrator and ask in this circumstance, administrator, how are you going to handle the safety of my wandering dementia resident when you only have one or two staff during the day? Most places at night in a 6-bed facility they're required to have one awake staff. And I don't know if that's enough or not. That's an assessment that every family member has to make for themselves, depending upon the dependency needs of their loved one being placed. So staffing is really important.
So basically what you're saying is the more needy, either mentally or physically, your loved one is, the more staff there really probably should be in the community or facility where they go, right?
That would be a general statement, and certainly it's always going to be based on the specifics of the care that your family member, your loved one needs. But absolutely, the issue of matching what the community, what the assisted living facility is able to provide with the needs of your resident are certainly going to change over time as the dependency needs continue to perhaps get heavier.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm asking you this because I really don't know. So I am aware of, they call them adult daycares. I hate that term, but I'm aware of these adult programs where you can take your loved one for, say, 4 or 8 hours. Do you know of anybody who has their loved one in an assisted living community plus goes to the adult daycare because maybe that community doesn't have the staff?
Absolutely. The adult daycare centers are really useful for family members who are trying to keep their resident living in their own home, but the responsible party has to go to work, so the adult daycare center really comes in handy because they can spend 8 hours at the adult daycare center. We also see that families can place their loved one in an adult daycare center, even though they live in an assisted living. So perhaps the bus comes and picks them up at 9 o'clock in the morning. The assisted living will have that person ready for their bus pickup at 9 o'clock in the morning. They go to their adult activity program during the day or for 4 hours, depending upon how that service is contracted for. And then the bus brings them back to the assisted living facility. It can be a really useful tool for the continued socialization of that resident.
And plus, they have the staff that are qualified to deal with certain things, right, with dementia?
Well, it depends. If you put them into, for instance, a Glenner-centered adult daycare program, then yes, they're going to have expertise in dementia. If you're putting them into another community placement, you would have to assess what the qualifications were of the other adult daycare centers to make sure always matching what the assessment needs are of your family member who's receiving the services with the services that the provider is offering.
Good point. Thanks for bringing that up. You know, I can understand why you turned this into a full-time career because there is so much to know. I mean, how you learned all this because you had an issue with your own mom, right?
Yes, I had an issue with my own mom. On her passing, I ended up having a lawsuit against the facility, and that took a couple of years to get sorted out. And then I had a lot of knowledge, but I knew that I didn't have the full picture yet. So that's when I matriculated at SCSU, got a master's degree, wrote my thesis on assisted living. And that was, I think we started our organization in 2009. I graduated in 2011. And I will tell you, every day that I spend in the office, I spend about 60 hours a week probably working at this job full time. There is always so much to know. There are so many moving parts. So it's just a constant and endless exciting adventure to find out what new we can find out today, which is why we think that the services and the website and the voice that we offer can help families, because when you are a family member who's making a placement, there is so much. It is so overwhelming. The entire healthcare arena is so fragmented. And then when you get into assisted living, it's also very complex. It looks like it's simple on the outside, but there are many, many moving parts, all of which impact the other. And the bottom line is what we try to work for is to understand what the issues are for families who are making placements and for the care then that the residents receive once they're in that facility. All the moving parts are of interest, and their only purpose is to help us understand how to improve the placement decision process for the families and how to improve the care that residents receive.
Well, thank you for all that you do. And that brings us to the next thing on your list, and that is medication assistance. So how do you know what the community does as far as that goes? They just tell you, we tell them when it's time to take their medication, but we don't watch them take it, or how do you know what they do?
Well, the regulations, Title 22 is pretty clear in a vague sort of way about what assisted living facilities can do. Assisted living facilities in the state of California are not medical care facilities. They are care and supervision models through the Department of Social Services, not through the Department of Public Health. There is no skilled medical professional who is required to be in the employ of the facility. Consequently, we have caregivers who are trained in personal care, learning how to toilet, learning how to shower, learning how to help residents get dressed, learning how to brush a resident's teeth, help them with that. So the caregivers are not skilled medical professionals. They're not CNAs. They're not LVNs as a general rule. So they're not qualified to administer medications, but they can assist with medications. So one of the ways that we recommend a family assess how good a facility is with medication administration is by checking the public record at community care licensing. Through the public record, you can see inspections, inspection reports, you can see complaint reports, you can see whether a facility has been cited for not following the medication protocols, whether there have been medication errors, which have resulted in complaints, or a resident getting somebody else's medication and then being 911 to the ER. So one of the best ways to assess whether a facility is capable of handling your family members' medications is to look at the public record and see whether the facility has been cited for a lot of medication errors or no medication errors. And you would obviously want to choose the facility that had no medication errors, because this assumes that the resident is not able to open their pill bottle and take their blood pressure medication for the day. Because these facilities have many demented residents, most facilities keep their medications centrally locked up and stored. So the facility then is the one who has to open mom's blood pressure medication, put it in a little cup, and then take it to mom and say, Mom, you need to take this blood pressure medication out of this little cup and put it in your mouth, and here's some water to help you get that down.
And that's allowed? Because
the person themselves is doing the administration, not the caregiver. Right. So medications is a big one.
Okay, so the person who is looking at the assisted living facility would check the public record in order to find out if there are complaints or if there were inspections that didn't go well, and specifically look for a community with no medication errors. Is that correct?
With no or few. Yes, that is correct.
Great. Okay, good. So anything else that we need to know about medication assistance, or is it mainly you need to go check the public record because they may or may not tell you?
Exactly. The public record is the closest thing that we have to objective findings, and you can obtain the public record through California Public Record Act requests directly to the Department of Social Services community care licensing. There is a community care licensing regional offices. I think there are, I can't remember, 8 or 13 regional offices in the state of California. So you just find your local regional office, request to see the public record for the facility in your area that you're thinking of, and they will provide you the document, the public record file, and then you're allowed to sit in their offices and go through and peruse it.
Wow, that seems like a lot of work.
Yes, but it's due diligence, though, and if you are placing your loved one in there and entrusting their care 24/7 to a facility, it's actually, in our view, it is a lot of work, but it's the safe thing to do. At least you're going into the decision with your eyes wide open.
That makes sense. Now, I know of people who they're called placement specialists, and they help you find a community. Do they do that? Do they go in and check the public record? Is that part of their service?
Well, placement agencies are unregulated, and I would imagine that whether a placement agency reviews the public record is a matter for their own organization. There's certainly not a requirement that they review the public record.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. So you do it, talk to your placement specialist to see if they do it.
And if they don't, encourage them to do it.
Right, because that's part of the reason, because you want to make sure that you're placing your loved one in a good place to live, right?
Exactly.
Okay, well, good. Oh, now remind me again, how do they find these community care licensing agencies? What are they called?
Sure. They're called regional offices, and the easy way to find them in California is to go to their website, the state's website, which is ccld.ca.gov. And that has everything that you need to know, or links to everything you need to know about community care licensing. And you're going to be looking for residential care facility for the elderly. And you would be searching for regional offices. And they will have a link to their list of regional offices throughout the state of California.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that's going to be quite helpful for people who are looking for this type of information. So that leaves us to the last thing that was on your list, which is personal care. What do we need to know about that?
Yes. Personal care is really what you're hoping that the assisted living facility is going to provide to your loved one. So personal care consists of assisting a frail, dependent elder with bathing, toileting. If they are beginning to be incontinent, you don't want your loved one left in a depend for 5 hours. You want that person to be taken to the bathroom on an every 2-hour schedule. They're going to be assisting brushing the teeth of the resident, helping that resident get dressed, changing that resident if they missed their toileting appointment and that their clothes are wet. So we don't want someone sitting in wet clothes. That leads to UTIs, which is urinary tract infections, and that we definitely don't want for our seniors. And the personal care, you want to look for. If you're doing a tour of an assisted living facility, you're going to be wanting to observe how the caregivers are interacting with the other residents who are already in care. Are they being gentle? Are they being persuasive? Or are they being rough? Are they handling them roughly? Are they handling them and speaking to them in a demeaning manner? And are they speaking to the resident in the language that the resident speaks? Most of the demographic of California assisted living is an English-speaking population. So we would want to make sure that the caregivers are speaking English in a way that our residents can understand.
Good point.
And we want them to treat our resident carefully. They are fragile. We would encourage watching for caregivers who are gentle, who don't grab, who don't tear the frail elder's skin. Frail elder's skin is very, very fragile, can tear easily. It is thin. They bruise very easily, so we certainly don't want someone grabbing our elder to move them to a chair because they're not moving fast enough. So you're going to be looking for maybe a kindness factor in the caregiver, to have the confidence that when you leave your family member, your dad, your mom, your husband, in an assisted living facility, that they're going to be taken care of by someone who is compassionate and who is kind and who will treat your person with dignity and with respect in all of their dealings. Another thing is really important. I know this sounds totally stupid, but this is totally true. If a caregiver is taking your dad to toilet him, then give the person some privacy and shut the door. I cannot tell you how frequently we read in the public record that doors are left open in settings where any other person would be expecting privacy. So we're just looking for the sense of dignity and compassion and care to carry over from the caregivers to the treatment of the individuals that they're caring for.
That's a good point. I wouldn't want the door being left open for me.
Of course.
And I might want somebody in the room if I need them. If I need them in the room, then that's one thing, but just leaving the door open for everybody.
Exactly. So it's just something to be mindful of when you're making these assessments. When you tour assisted living facilities, you want to look at 3 or 4 or 5 in your price range, and then do a comparison and see which on all of these areas, and see which one you think is going to offer the best care. And then I really have to say that after you do make a placement, it is so important for family to continue their advocacy for that resident. Continue the advocacy, be there several times a week, monitoring what's happening, because I will guarantee you that residents who have family members who are frequent visitors generally get better care than people who have no visitors at all.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to be really fast. But when my father-in-law went into an assisted living facility, not here in California, but in another state, he went in with his wife, and she was in her 80s and he was in his 90s. And, we didn't live there, so we couldn't advocate for him. He lived in the memory care area, and she lived in independent living. She didn't want to cause a fuss. He would be sitting in wet diapers for 2 hours, and she said, well, I don't want to cause a fuss. She felt like if she said something about what they were doing, then she was going to be punished somehow. And I thought that was just horrendous, because I know that if my husband, who is older than me, winds up in an assisted living facility or memory care or anything like that, I'm going to be a tiger. And I'm going to say, you need to get down here. I'm going to be the squeaky wheel. And, a lot of people in their 80s, they don't want to cause a fuss. They don't want to do that.
It is true. It is true, and it's a very common concern. It's a common fear that families, that residents have, that they don't want to make waves because they fear retaliation. And from my point of view, that is the important part of having an advocate, either a family member to advocate, to do that, to run interference for those sorts of occurrences that are unacceptable. But there's also another service that's available. It's called the Ombudsman Program. The Ombudsman Program is in every state, with some exception. There generally is a small paid staff in the community which is responsible for the Ombudsman Volunteer Program. In San Diego County, I think we have over 100 volunteer ombudsmen. If you have a problem in an assisted living facility, there is a poster. There is supposed to be a poster in every facility that tells you what the number is for the Ombudsman Program. You can call that number. It's a toll-free number, identify that there's a problem in the facility and let the ombudsman come in and run interference and try to resolve whatever the issue is. And if all else fails or not, you can always choose to make a formal complaint to the Department of Social Services Community Care Licensing. And it's incumbent on Community Care Licensing, when they receive a complaint about inadequate, inappropriate care, elder abuse, neglect, they are required to initiate a complaint investigation. We're talking about people's lives, so from my point of view, it's not the right time to be reticent. It's imperative on everyone who comes into an assisted living facility to be watchful over everyone who is in there. And if you see something, that's the rule. If you see something, say something.
That is great advice. You have been a wealth of information, Chris. Thank you so much for coming on the show. But before we end, I want to real quickly try to get in the 2 questions that I like to ask. And the first one is, what do you think people should know before they retire?
I think the first thing that they should know before they retire is that they don't have to retire. I say keep working. I think working is have a reason to get up in the morning.
So that's great advice. Have a reason to get up. Don't just sit around in the old style retirement where you have the rocking chair, right?
Exactly. Well, that's my point of view.
Great. That's right, because you can retire at any time, and you choose to advocate for people who are in nursing homes. And I think that's a wonderful way to spend your time.
Assisted living.
Right, exactly. Assisted living. See, I get these words confused. So I'm glad that there are people out there that help me learn this terminology. And don't you have an app that can help people with terminology?
We do. We have a wonderful app. It's called Assisted Living 101, and it is a free Android app. We don't have it written for the iPhone yet, but we had a volunteer write this Android app, and it's available at the Google Play Store, and it has terminologies about California assisted living, so it's really specific to California assisted living facilities, but then there are some additional general terms of long-term care that are included in that. And it's a passive application. It doesn't collect any of your personal information. It doesn't ask for a login. It's just a free, simple download available at your Google Play Store. Thank you very much for letting me talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. Apparently, I need it. So I'm going to have to download that and I have an Android, so that's perfect. So, Chris, how can people contact you if they want more information about, I believe your organization's name is rcfereform.org?
Our website is rcfe, the word reform.org, and the organization is called Consumer Advocates for RCFE Reform. And we welcome visitors to our website, and if you want to contact us, we have a contact form, and it will send me an email, and if you leave your telephone number in the contact us form, I will call you back. I would love to speak and assist in any way that we can.
Wonderful. And let me just repeat that again. So it's R like Richard, C like Cat, F like Frank, E like Edward, R like Richard again, the word reform.org. And I am actually going to have a link in the show notes. So if you would like to, get that link and you haven't had a chance to write it down, just go to rockyourretirement.com and it will be in the show notes. And then one more thing that I wanted to mention is Chris has been extremely generous. She's helped us create a freebie with all of the information that she talked about today. And in order to get that freebie, just go to rockyourretirement.com/assisted living. So thanks so much, Chris. We really appreciate your coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for inviting us. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your podcast listeners.
Great. And for my listeners, don't forget, we'll see you next week on Rock Your Retirement.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Your Retirement Show. If you are rocking your retirement or know someone who would make a great guest on our show, please send us an email at podcast@rockyourretirement.com.
Hi, this is Kathy. When I'm not hosting Rock Your Retirement, I'm helping people with their Medicare insurance. One of the times you need to check your Medicare insurance is when you've moved. To get my free guide, 5 Things You Need to Know About Medicare When You Are Moving, just go to medicarequick.com/move. And in the meantime, listen to these cool disclosures. Neither Medicare Quick nor its agents is connected with the federal Medicare program. Medical insurance licensed in the states of California, Florida, Nevada, and Texas, and Medicare Advantage and prescription drug plan service areas vary. California Insurance License 0797566.